come to order. Good afternoon, members. It's Monday, June 28th, 2021. We have Senate File Number 7 before us, the Omnibus Judiciary and Public Safety Bill. For the records, remember, we do have a quorum. And just to kind of run through a couple items here, I'll have Senator Warren open with his opening comments, and then Mr. Turner will go through the spreadsheet that's 6/28/21, dated at 12:01 p.m. That will be the spreadsheet that we'll go through. And of course, Mr. Backus is here also. They're both on Zoom. We have our commissioners with us. We have one amendment that we know of, but we are waiting for another amendment to adopt. So we may have to go into recess if it doesn't show up, but that's what we know so far. Okay. Welcome, Senator Limmer. We miss you on finance.
I really miss you all, too.
I'm sure you do. In your spare time, you could have been on finance. I'm just saying.
Well, thank you, members and Madam Chair. Senate File 7 is the Omnibus Criminal Justice or Judiciary Bill. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce or have introduced a delete everything amendment, which reflects the decisions made throughout this process and have been approved by the House and Senate leadership, majority leaderships.
Thank you, Senator Limmer.
That amendment is the A21-0253.
And that has been posted, and members that are here, it's on your desk. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
You move the
That's
A21?
right. I move A21-0253.
On that motion, members, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Senator Limmer.
Thank you. Senate File 7, as amended, is the Judiciary and Public Safety Budget Bill, and it contains in the amendment before you the agreed-upon language and funding between the House and Senate leadership. This budget covers the entire judicial branch and related boards, that being public defenders, civil legal service, guardians ad litem, the Department of Corrections, the Criminal Justice Divisions of the Department of Public Safety, and the Department of Human Rights, and several smaller boards. As a reminder, several of these are constitutionally required duties, which include paying for courts, public defenders, and prisons. The vast majority of costs in these agencies are personnel, such as judges, court staff, prison guards, probation officers, agents and forensic scientists at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, State Fire Marshal, and other DPS divisions. The bill also contains several bipartisan policy provisions as well, including these, and I'll highlight them. One, strengthening our criminal sexual conduct laws to protect sexual assault and rape victims. This includes resolving the legal issues of voluntary intoxication, highlighted by the Supreme Court earlier this year. That was introduced by both Senator Senjem and Senator Latz. A new limitation on law enforcement's use of civil asset forfeiture. This has been an issue that's eluded us for a number of years. However, we're addressing it in this. Civil asset forfeiture on individuals who pose a legitimate threat to public safety while better safeguarding civil liberties. That was Senator Johnson's bill, along with Representative Jamie Becker-Finn. The Hardell-Sherrill Act provides for increased safety and responsibility and accountability in licensed correction facilities. We also strengthened our DWI laws by improving implementation of the repeat offender ignition interlock law that was introduced by Senator Latz. We regulated the use of no-knock warrants. We provide confidential informants additional protection through Matthews Law. That's requiring law enforcement, when they find someone to be used as a confidential informant, to tell them of unique risks that they may experience. In the case of Matthews Law, it was named after one of the confidential informants, was an individual who was off his drugs. He was in remission of using that type of addiction. He was used, but he got reintroduced into the use of drugs during his duties as a confidential informant. Travis law is also included in this bill, and that would initiate mental health practitioners to respond to suicide calls rather than police officers. But across the state, we do not have the resources for every single jurisdiction, so we are recognizing where available is the magic words for that. But for the most part, most of the metropolitan area and our larger population centers would have those individuals available. We also create an office for missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, as well as the implementation of the Task Force for Missing and Murdered African American women. We toughened sentences for child pornographers. We created a new crime for child torture. That was Senator Jim Carlson's inclusion in this bill. And importantly, as the Twin Cities experiences a dramatic increase in violent crime with a surge in homicides, rapes, robberies, carjackings, and aggravated assaults, this bill puts public safety forward by protecting Minnesotans and holding criminals accountable. We do this by supporting the safety of our citizens through the use of law enforcement, the very people who put their lives at risk to protect us. This agreement includes other highlights, a new law called Officer Eric Matson's Law, which increases penalties for assaulting police officers that result in serious bodily harm. We do include pay increases for state law enforcement officials, namely in this bill, officials that would be working in the BCA or DPS provisions. We include an expansion of violent crime enforcement teams, otherwise known as VSETs, aimed at gang and drug trafficking, along with an experimental concept of a VSET for light rail in order to protect passengers in the metropolitan light rail system. Our aim has always been to put together a bill that contains provisions with the broadest bipartisan support possible and the greatest number or approval of our citizens in Minnesota. This is that bill, and I ask for your support. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris Turner to review the budget spreadsheets and to add a brief description on the fiscal changes from what the Senate previously passed as to what we now have in our final agreement. Policy questions, I have Ken Turner, our nonpartisan staff researcher as well. And they're both on the Zoom connection.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. And I think, if there are questions, let's let Mr. Turner go through the spreadsheet. Again, we're working off of 6/28 of 2021, the 12:01 p.m. Zoom spreadsheet. Welcome,
Okay.
Mr. Turner.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. The changes of note are highlighted in yellow on the spreadsheet on your screen. And I'll just start then with the Supreme Court. On line 5, we have the judicial salary line. The conference committee or the final agreement reflects the Senate position of 2.5% the first year. The final agreement also had the Senate position on courthouse security grants and the TBI exam feasibility report at $500,000 the first year and $30,000 respectively. On civil legal services, the Senate went into conference at 2/3 of the governor's rec. The final agreement reflects total funding at the governor and the House recommendation for civil legal. The Court of Appeals, once again, judicial salary. The agreement reflects the Senate position of 2.5% the first year. Move to district courts. We have, again, judicial salary 2.5% the first year. And then we have a House provision increasing interpreter pay $200,000 each year one time. Move to the guardian ad litem. This is the last judicial agency. Once again, the Senate formula, 2.5% first year for employee compensation. Public Defense Board, line 74, maintain public defense services. The Senate came in at 2/3 the governor's rec. The House came in at the governor's rec. Senate came up substantially to within 97% of the governor's recommendation, from 11.2 to 15.2. The next line of note is in the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, cybersecurity, FBI compliance. The Senate went into conference at 5.1 million. We came out down $1 million, approximately 4.2 million. Although money's fungible, basically that money didn't leave the BCA. It kind of entered line 130, and I'll get to that in a sec. Line 116, the bill enacts in forfeiture reform. This line just reflects BCA software update cost of $24,000 in first year. Then we have law enforcement salary increase. This is in its own article, in Article 8 of the bill. These are the salary increases that you've seen in 3 other bills: commerce, transportation, and environment. These are the BCA increases on lines 121 and 122. Then on line 124, we have drug driving lab testing support for FTE and supplies. This was a high governor's priority, and the final agreement funded it at $825,000 each year ongoing. In alcohol and gambling enforcement, the only change of note was the inclusion of law enforcement salary increases for their special agents. We move to Office of Justice programs, and here we have a number of House-only grant programs and provisions. I'll start on line 177, survivor support and prevention grants, funded at $400,000 each year, one time. Expansion of juvenile justice unit, $200,000 each year, ongoing. Innovation and community safety grants, $400,000 each year, one time. Youth intervention programs, $286,000 each year, ongoing. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Office, $500,000 each year, ongoing. Combating sex trafficking grants, $250,000 each year, ongoing. On line 183, we have racially diverse youth group grants, $45,000 each year, one time. And finally, 184, we have Missing and Murdered African Women's Task Force, $100,000 the first year and $50,000 the second. It's one-time appropriation. And we skip down to Hometown Heroes. This was funded, it was not in the original Senate bill. It was funded at $400,000 or $4 million each year, ongoing. And then there's a House provision the Senate accepted, body camera grants. We have a rider that prioritizes rural law enforcement agencies. That's at $500,000 each year, one time. Then we have, to reflect the ignition interlock changes that Senator Limmer mentioned in his brief summary, we have administrative costs for driver and vehicle services. It's a special revenue cost. I think it's the driver services account. $854,000 the first biennium, $778,000 the second. Post Board, the final agreement gave the Post Board 1 FTE, and it also gave the Human Rights Department 1 FTE to improve caseload processing. Department of Corrections within institutions. The first highlighted line is the Healthy Start Act, alternative placement of pregnant inmates. That came in at the Senate recommendation. Then we move down to the law enforcement salary increases. These are the eligible licensed peace officers within the Department of Corrections, the fugitive unit. This reflects their salary increase in Article 8 of the bill. Then we have a number of bed costs. These are changes to the criminal code which result in increased bed costs to the Department of Corrections. We have Line 268 and 269, two child pornography, Senate only provisions. Then the fentanyl provision, Madam Chair, was dropped from the bill, sorry to say, and child torture was included. Then we have two other criminal code changes that were identical. They agreed, the Senate and the House, they came in identical, so I haven't highlighted them. Under community supervision, the final agreement reflects the governor and the House's position on one-time Community Correction Act and county probation officer grants. That's $1,321,000 each year, one time. There are no tails. It's because there's a working group that the bill creates. It requires a report. It will come back and make recommendations on how to deliver probation services and how to fund them. And we'll be discussing that 2 years from now for the 24-25 budget. We moved on to line 288 and 289. We have aiding and abetting task force, a House provision. It's included in the agreement, and post-release employment grants of $300,000 one time, another House provision that was included. The Senate also accepted juvenile justice reporting costs on EJJ, which is extended juvenile jurisdiction statistics and tracking. 55 the first year and 9 in 23 and subsequent. And then we have a predatory offender working group. In the original budget in both the House and the Senate, this was housed up in the BCA at $131,000. We moved it to the Department of Corrections. They said they could do it for $25,000. Then in operation support, line 304, expand the oversight of DOC licensed facilities. This was a governor's recommendation, and it's enhanced oversight and regulation of basically jail facilities within the state. The Senate agreed with the governor's position, and this is in the final agreement. Then finally, the Senate came up to the governor's rec on information technology, which is basically minute current services. Then there are two House-only provisions, 307 facility security audit, that's in the final agreement. The Senate agreed to that, and jailhouse witness data collection. We move on, the legislature, to the legislature, the Data Practices Commission, the final agreement does fund that commission on an ongoing basis. Then forfeiture reform pops up again. This is the cost to the state auditor for reporting requirements. The Department of Natural Resources, DNR body cams came to the conference committee late in the deal, and we added it at your request, at leadership's request, Senate $876,000 the first biennium and $778,000 the second. Then transfers. The one transfer of note is the $30 million for the disaster assistance contingency account. The conference committee ran into problems keeping within its target. And so leadership graciously said, you do not need to fund this with general fund money. And what the bill has now is a transfer that's contingent upon there being a surplus in the general fund at the end of fiscal year 2021. And that is $30 million. That helped the conference committee break the financial stalemate. The leadership told the committee that it could take that $30 million that had been designated for DACA and spend it in either biennium, which is why this committee has a bit of a strange target because about 2/3 of the way through, we were told that we could go under on the first biennium and over on the second biennium if necessary. And it's also, we've kind of got, instead of a 2-year target, we got a 4-year target. So, and the 4-year target is about $227 million. Okay, there's a couple more things I would like to point out here. Revenue adjustments that are important. This is a big policy provision on line 365. It's the waiver of the criminal and traffic surcharge for indigent defendants. It costs about $2.4 million a year. The Senate acceded to the House on that. Then forfeiture reform shows up again. This is loss of filing fees to the general fund. And finally, the adjustment to other funds. There's one important one here. Most of this is just either small potatoes or, or the House and the Senate agreeing. But this is an important one. The emergency communication rate change, 95 to 80 cents. That's the per line per month phone surcharge. The governor recommended dropping it from 95 to 80 cents. The House wanted to keep it at 95 and use the money for a grant program. The Senate held, and we are at the governor's rec for that, and the surcharge will be going down to 80 cents. And that, Madam Chair, are the major changes to the budget, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Members, that disaster contingency language is on page 25, and I would like to thank you, Senator Limmer, and to your staff for not agreeing to monies available till spent language like the Commissioner of Deed had peppered in the bill all over. And I know Senator Pratt fought very hard to give a time certain on those dollars, but he was not so I'd like to point that out in the Finance Committee that it's really important to make sure that we have a bill like yours with time certain. Any questions for Senator Limmer, Mr. Turner? Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Senator Limmer, on page 7, the aiding and abetting task force, I do remember being a member of the committee talking a little bit about that. Can you explain that? It's not a big item, but I'm just wondering how that came about, or
Senator Ingebrigtsen, what line is that?
that's line 288.
288. Thank you. Mr. Turner or Senator Limmer?
Madam Chair,
Chairman.
Senator Ingebrigtsen, did you want a policy answer or a financial one?
Well, I guess I can't ask for anything other than financial, but policy-wise, what was wrong with what we
I
had?
think we're going to move to one of our nonpartisan staff, perhaps Mr. Turner or Mr. Backus might be able to give you more definition.
Who would like to answer that one? Mr. Backus?
Madam Chair and members, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of, I don't know that I could, maybe Senator Ingebrigtsen can clarify his question. I could point out that there's a rider for the task force, and the actual language begins on line 75.1 and basically provides a, as you might imagine, a task force to study this issue and come back to the legislature with with a resolution on it. It was a House-only provision that was included in the final bill. Is there something specific, Senator Ingebrigtsen, I can answer about that?
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
No, Madam Chair, I'll go offline if I have any questions, so I'll ask further. Madam Chair, if I could ask one more.
Sure. Senator Ingebrigtsen?
The line 304, expand oversight in Department of Corrections licensing facilities. Those are our local jails. I'm assuming. Are they going to have there's more oversight? Is that going to be a committee that does that, or how is that?
Senator Limmer?
What line are you on?
304.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Turner?
Madam Chair, Senator Ingebrigtsen, that money will be, I think the commissioner could probably explain this better than me, but I believe that money will fund state inspectors of local facilities, state inspection of local facilities.
Madam Chair.
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
Madam Chair, I'm assuming, and I don't want to belabor it, I'm assuming it's going to, yeah, it does say expand, so I know there's oversight as well right now, so expanding, so that's good, that's fine, thank you.
Madam Chair, on Senator
Senator Limmer.
Ingebrigtsen's first question regarding the aiding and abetting felony murder, I believe we sustained the membership on that task force. We wanted it to be a broader task force representation than originally thought. And that's the only differences, but it's to give the legislature a little added insight into a possible change in law regarding felony murder. There's a number of states that do not have felony murder on their books. This was brought to our attention by a number of citizens that have relatives in prison. At the current time, they were found guilty years ago. Their cases raise a question of whether we should continue felony murder or not in this state. So we thought that a task force was appropriate to give us direction and advice. It's a well-balanced, what I think is a well-balanced approach on the task force membership.
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
Thank you, no, Madam Chair, but I'm looking at it, it does appear to be very well balanced, so thank you.
Senator Franson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few questions for Senator Limmer regarding the bill, and there's been a lot of recent chatter, changes, press conference, announcements, and I just want to ensure that what the governor just announced a little earlier today, whether any of that is included in this bill, particularly when I know we went through line 340 about body cameras and the $774 million to go with that and expand that program throughout our state. Is that in line with what we just heard in the news? Literally have a message from 1:21 p.m. and we were getting close to being in this room to talk about this bill. Is that included? Is that an agreement, or is that above and beyond what's in this bill? Can you kind of reconcile what we just heard from the governor in light of your bill today?
Yeah,
Senator
Madam Chair, Senator Franzen, I am not aware of the details of the governor's announcement. I have no knowledge of what any specifics of what he made mention of, so I can't answer your question in particular. I wouldn't even want to make a guess on it. We are waiting for an amendment that does involve body cameras. We had originally positioned to expand body cameras in rural areas of Minnesota where those smaller departments simply can't afford that type of equipment. And we had a line item that specifically recognized non-metropolitan defined areas. They would be excluded from the availability of cameras. But we are awaiting some final decisions on it, and that's what the chair made reference to, that we may have to recess for the exact language. Can you reveal to me what the governor said so I can perhaps make a comment on it?
Senator Franson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Limmer, I'm sure you can probably get a printout from your staff. I just have it on my phone, and it's quite extensive with the comments, so I don't want to verbatim read the press release. So I think if we can get staff available to print that and provide you with that, that would be great. But it does reference body cameras. That's why I'm confused that we're having the bill when there's obvious not meeting of the minds when it comes to the branches of government. And I argue that this bill is not ready for prime time, especially if we're going to have to recess to take more amendments that are not agreed upon or ready for prime time. So, Madam Chair, I just think this bill is still not ready for our committee, and I would move to table the bill at this moment until those are resolved. I don't think it's fair for the public to come to, or either any of our legislative staff or legislators here, to work on an incomplete agreement. And we just had a very powerful press release, press conference that I was part of with the Posse Caucus, People of Color, Indigenous Caucus earlier on the Rotunda, urging the public to be engaged in this process, urging legislators to continue to work for a better agreement. I think this bill is okay, but it's not adequate for the time. And I certainly support law enforcement and want to support them in this bill with the raises. I spent over an hour just yesterday or 2 days ago, I think it was yesterday, days are running quite close to each other in the special session. And they were very appreciative of us including their raises, and I want to support that. There's a lot of things that I could support in this bill. I certainly believe there isn't enough meat in the bones to really think that this is a transformational public safety bill. And if we have the governor and the House members still making the arguments that this bill is incomplete, I think it's incomplete for our review, and we still have time to move this. I think we have time to get it right, and I hope that we can work extra
Madam Chair?
time to move this forward, and I
Senator
move my
Benson.
motion.
Madam Chair, is there a motion before us?
There is a motion before us. Thank
And
you.
the motion to table is not debatable?
It is non-debatable. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Senator Benson. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Madam Chair, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Roll call has been requested. Roll call is granted. Clerk will take the roll. Chair votes no.
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
No.
Senator Marty? Senator Benson?
No.
Senator Champion?
Yes.
Senator Franzen?
Yes.
Senator Johnson?
No.
Senator Kent?
Aye.
Senator Kiffmeyer? Senator Pratt?
No.
There being 4 yeses and 6 noes, the motion does not prevail. Senator Franzen, I would just like to make a comment that we started this Finance Committee in the hope that we could get the commissioners' comments and we could get the the delete all amendment reviewed and the spreadsheet, and the comments of this bill is not ready. Yes, it is, there is some moving pieces to it, but this was out of respect for the members here, so we didn't have to be here all night reviewing some of it. When this amendment does come across our table, we will have to, I'm sure, have to go into recess, but I know there are conversations going on, but that was the purpose of starting this Finance Committee, is not to have you all just sitting around, and our commissioners sitting around. So with that, there's a lot of good pieces in this bill, too, that need to be discussed. But Senator Limmer, there's one piece that is not in this bill that needs to be discussed, and that is the fentanyl threshold piece. And I know you know, and we're all very disappointed in losing that piece. It went through the committee process. I'm 100% vote by everybody. So can you tell me what happened? Because it's
Well,
such an important piece.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Madam Chair. I was rather surprised at the opposition of the House refusing to accept the fentanyl provision. After all, it came out of the Senate floor as a standalone bill. I believe it was 62-5 in its passage, a very strong bipartisan effort. If you don't know, the compound of fentanyl is now being introduced in our state at record numbers. It's infiltrated even into the marijuana trade, and it's designed to give a greater high to marijuana use. And oftentimes the buyer of marijuana does not even know they're buying marijuana that's laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl, 3 grams. 3 grams of fentanyl will kill every human being. It's a very, very small amount. And we had recognized it as the same penalty as heroin. And in this case, the House thought that penalty was too severe for such a small amount. We've had a debate over the weight of illicit drugs versus the intense danger of a small amount for many years. And we've gone back and forth on that over the years, especially with crack cocaine. Crack cocaine is highly addictive. One use, it's almost an instantaneous addiction that it will cause. However, public defense practitioners have convinced this legislature that a small amount of a few grams was too severe for such a weight, but they ignored the concept of the addictive quality of it. I hope we don't make that same mistake with fentanyl. In speaking with Commissioner Harrington, he has told me that fentanyl is everywhere in this state. It's pouring in, and it's being laced into all sorts of other illicit drugs, and it's designed to create a more severe addiction so that the consumers keep buying it. And so we do have a serious threat to the safety of our citizens. And I thought it was appropriate, and the Senate agreed that it was an appropriate measure to put in a public safety bill like this. The House simply did not agree with it, and they were very resistant to accepting it. And in order to move the bill forward, we had to reluctantly abort that portion of the bill.
I understand. Senator Limmer. Thank you. I'm sure we'll have a little more robust
Quite
conversation
honestly,
on the floor.
Madam Chair, recently Commissioner Harrington reported a highway stop. I don't think it was in Minnesota, but a highway stop where they collected over 2,000 pounds of fentanyl, pure fentanyl. It was roughly the measure to kill hundreds of millions of people. This is not just a small little sprinkling of fentanyl coming into the state. This is a major assault on our country and on this state, and it really should have been addressed as quickly as possible.
The off-market opioid market is terrible, too. Just lost a constituent to
Madam
overdose
Chair.
of fentanyl. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm especially concerned, Senator Limmer, though, in particular with the discussion over the amount. To me, that shows a real lack of understanding that when it comes to fentanyl and also carfentanil, which is 100 times more potent, other kinds of drugs like this, the sense of going by a weight or a quantity just desperately misses the danger of this particular drug, fentanyl. And so it's a little bit concerning that they're talking about not supporting it because of this, quote, small amount. When it comes to this particular drug, you cannot use size as an equivalent measure of potency and danger, especially since a tiny amount cut into other drugs is extremely dangerous. So I was a little bit concerned about the lack of understanding about, in this case, that's kind of an old standard when you look at some of these weights, but when it comes to this and these new drugs, that is not the case.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, I think it was a broader philosophic opposition. I think there's reason to believe in some people's minds that increasing penalties is not effective a tool on the war on drugs. And that was more of the argument than the specific weight versus potency discussion. I just think philosophically, there are some people that just don't think that dangerous drugs should be addressed with a more severe criminal penalty. And unfortunately, fentanyl is killing more people in the communities of color than anywhere else in the state of Minnesota. And so it's unfortunate that it wasn't included in this bill.
Okay. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Meantime, people are dying. And so these are unsuspecting people who have drug issues anyway, but now they are vulnerable to this kind of situation. It's really sad because people's lives are going to be lost because of not doing this piece of this bill.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions, but I will follow up on the discussion that has been going on thus far. It seems to be a very robust conversation around weight and quantity, and that discussion was missing back when we looked at and it was alluded to, the cocaine versus pure cocaine challenge. And remember, it was Judge Pam Alexander who had the foresight to say that it was biased when you looked at how much cocaine was mixed with crack, and that whole weight question, and disproportionately, people of color were being sent to federal prisons and other prisons when they had less cocaine than those who have more money, which is usually the majority community when you think in terms of cocaine. And so that sentencing disparity we are still suffering from right now. And that is not to undermine the importance of this robust conversation, because I do agree with you, it's very dangerous. But I think if we're going to really be concerned, we have to be concerned as a guiding principle. And I just would encourage us to do that, because I tell you, members of my community have been decimated by the imbalance when you think in terms of sentencing around crack cocaine versus pure cocaine, and others who got really a slap on the wrist when it came to, just cocaine. Now, this also leads to my question to Senator Limmer. Senator Limmer, it sounds like you have concerns, as I heard Senator Kiffmeyer talk about their lack of insight and maybe lack of understanding around the importance of this provision. Can you tell me if you guys had any meetings of that conference committee, or what it became defined as later on, to talk about this provision or any other provision that we would believe to be important? So did you all have an opportunity to meet openly and have a discussion about this fentanyl provision and other important provisions?
Madam Chair?
Senator Limmer.
Senator Champion, yes, we did. It actually was a bill introduced by the chairwoman, Senator Rosen. And we had a hearing in our committee in the Senate, and we passed it individually, and we brought it to the Senate floor. And as I said before, it passed 62-5. So yes, we've had plenty of public discussion regarding this particular provision.
And Madam Chair, can I follow up?
Senator Champion.
Senator, if I wasn't Limmer wasn't quite as clear, I'm talking about whether your conference committee had meetings in the open to discuss this important provision. I remember it being discussed in the Senate. I thought it was important to have a robust discussion and potentially include it, because I think, if my memory serves me correctly, that I supported this provision. I'm asking whether your conference committee with the House, whether you all had meetings and sessions in order to discuss the importance of this provision in the open, so that members of the public could weigh in. We could all look to see what was included or wasn't, because there's a number of provisions that were not included, and I think it's because you all didn't have any conference committee meetings. But I don't want to be presumptuous, so I'm asking whether you guys had any open committee meetings so that we can really debate this important provision that the chair had put forward.
Madam Chair and Senator Champion, yes, we had open meetings, but we were restricted to Zoom equipment. We invited the public to participate at every Zoom meeting we had regarding the conference committee level. Like I said, it was open to the public for their scrutiny. We opened it up for, or we invited people to make comment about every provision in the conference committee report. So yes, as much as we could possibly do, we kept it as open as possible and made it available for public comment. And
Madam Chair, one more question? Oh, I can't hear you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you can't. Sorry, Senator Champion.
Thank you. Senator Limmer, did you in that conference committee talk about some of the other concerns around what should constitute a secondary stop versus a primary stop? Because sometimes when primary stops, such as some air freshener hanging from your rearview mirror or failure to wear a seatbelt, and how that was being interpreted or being handled with law enforcement stops, to really see if law enforcement agreed or disagreed around whether those sort of stops should be primary or secondary stops, and how that might yield a better outcome between community and police.
Senator
Any
Limmer.
conversations about that?
Thank you,
in public?
Madam Chair. Senator Champion, yes, we had discussions regarding what I would consider pretextual stops. Those were the type of police stops of moving vehicles that may have taillights out, headlights, things hanging from rear view mirrors. We had all of that discussed. We had not only the proponents of repealing such laws, but we also had discussion with law enforcement personnel and those organizations represented by law enforcement. And we had a fairly thorough discussion about that. Law enforcement recommended that particularly items that were of a safety nature should continue as a stop. One doesn't want to have headlights out driving at night because one could hurt people, pretty obvious. And some people just don't maintain their vehicles as well. Others, we did have a discussion about some of the other things, including a license tab that was off. It's not quite the same safety reason or safety provision, but nevertheless, we did have pretty full discussion regarding pretextual stops.
And is
Senator
it,
Champion.
Madam Chair, last question, I promise. Is it fair to say that law enforcement supported or did not support making some changes when it comes to quote unquote pretextual stops?
Law enforcement was opposed to those types of repeal efforts. And we did get information regarding some of the elements, the consequences of those stops that actually protected the public. In the last few years, since 2018, the state troopers gave us information that during such stops, they found 922 illegal firearms in those types of stops. And so those stops, although perhaps well-intended, resulted in other more serious crimes being revealed.
And Madam Chair, I did say that
Senator
was going to be
Champion.
my last question, but I promise this is my last question. Did
Senator Champion.
State Patrol did State Patrol give you a racial breakdown as to when it came to those stops? Anything
Senator
around that issue?
Madam Chair, no, they did not. And but I did have personal conversation with, I believe it was a law enforcement official. I can't remember exactly who. When it comes to recording data on the type of race of an individual, right now the state of Minnesota does not require race to be included on the description of the person on a driver license. So it's up to the officer to make comment about the race of an individual, at least in Minneapolis. And it's up to them to mark what race they think the driver is. And so it does open up an idea for all of us to perhaps consider race on a driver license. And that way one could quantify that type of data in a much more clinical fashion. But I did have that personal conversation. I don't think that particular angle was part of a public discussion, but I wanted to make it public now.
And Madam Chair.
Senator Champion,
This is one of
this is the last
this is
time.
one of no, this is
Thank
just a
you.
statement. I don't want to ask him a question, Madam Chair. You've been quite patient, and I do appreciate that. Madam Chair, I think this is part of the challenge with this bill, and the challenge, even though there's some good things in it, where it's not as, it doesn't feel as comprehensive and as thoughtful as I would hope that it would have been in order to address some of these important issues. And the reason why I raise that is because I remember when I first started off in the House, and there was two conversations. One was when we were making seatbelts a primary offense as opposed to it being remaining as a secondary offense. And then there was also this same sort of question when we were moving from 0.110 being the legal limit for alcohol down to 0.08. And even when you think in terms of the seatbelt, Madam Chair, there was a concern that there should be some opportunity for data to be collected around race. Because if you don't ask this question, and even though Senator Limmer has talked about who he talked to personally, that's different from what's on the table, so that we won't use anecdotes, but we can use empirical data by which to say, in this pre-contextual context, these are the people who are being stopped. That's important. And that's a part of what I would consider important reforms, because communities of color feel preyed upon and feel like even if it comes across thoughtful, it seems contrived, that you'll stop me for a light, or you'll stop me for something hanging like air fresheners, and say, well, whenever someone has air fresheners, it usually means they're trying to cover up for marijuana, right? That's the kind of stuff that happens. And how do I know that? Because I practice law every day. How do I know that? Because I listen to it and I see it. And as lawmakers, we're supposed to be the thoughtful ones, to be objective, not to just protect one group versus another, but what can we do on balance in order to make sure that we are promoting trust, safety, for us to be lawful, not lawlessness, and not giving others an opportunity to use the law as a way to hide what I would consider discriminatory practices. And so it is for that reason that I cannot support this bill as we have it and as it's being relayed to us today. And I'm disappointed that we in the Senate did not have a more robust process early on, because a lot of these things were not heard in Judiciary. And I'm disappointed about that, because that's where I believe that some of these things could be realized. And whether someone is right or wrong, informed or have lack of insight, that will come to the top. And so I'm disappointed in what I'm hearing thus far. And Madam Chair, thank you again for just letting me ask a couple of questions that I didn't want to, impede upon your patience today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Champion. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a couple of comments, and I appreciate what's been being said here, and I really appreciate Senator Limmer's patience in dealing with this very important issue and very important bill. With regards to the fentanyl, there's no question this is a horrible poison. And instead of arguing, and I believe that the author of the bill said there wasn't so much about the quantity of fentanyl as much as it is about the whole philosophical belief that drugs are okay or should be accepted. And I think it shows actually in the jail, the prison population since 2019 have dropped 2,400 beds. So we've taken a whole different look at what I understand and what I have learned over the last years is a whole different view on whether you should imprison people for possession or dealing of drugs. Now, I practiced a profession as well, Senator Champion, and I did that for 34 years, and I've seen an awful lot. And I've never really boasted or given any stories, but I've seen a fair amount. No, I didn't work in the metro area, but I can tell you, I'm going to give you a hypothetical that it may hit close to home to some of you, and it may not. And it's the 3 young kids that have been, 2 of them murdered and 1 just barely hanging on with their own life. And I don't know exactly where that was, but I think it's in the city of Minneapolis. And this was a drive-by shooting. And I think if one were to actually pay attention to that, I think it's a red vehicle. They're still looking for it. In fact, there's a $35,000 reward I seen on the news last night for any information leading to the arrest. But let's back up before the shooting actually occurred. Let's back up at the possibility that maybe that same car, in their haste, ran a stop sign, or did the California stop at a stop sign? We all know what that is. It rolls through it. Or maybe it had a taillight out. I don't think anybody knows. But just think if that officer would have pulled that person over 3-4 minutes before that terrible, heinous crime occurred, and would have seen the gun barrel of a gun sticking out from underneath the seat. Maybe today we wouldn't have to be watching those news releases of those 3 poor, beautiful children that were caught in the line of fire. Now, I don't know what the MO was. I'm assuming it's a gang-related. We're going to shoot maybe dad. I can only guess. But just think, cops pull people over for all kinds of infractions, and they also walk away from violations and say, let's stop at the next stop sign next time, and you won't have to be pulled over. There's a reason why. That's what officers are trained to do. They're trained to look, not only for their own safety in the car, but potentially the safety of others. And that's very clear by Senator Limmer's testimony that the State Patrol found that many guns on traffic stops. So let's not be a Portland, Oregon who's saying, you don't stop people for minor infractions. That's throwing public safety, at least part of it, totally out the door. So that's my comments, and I'm glad that's not included in the bill, Senator Limmer. I was quite taken back when the House even brought that forward. And we went down to as minimal as something hanging from the mirror, which I think back in the 60s, that was a big deal when things hung in the mirror, and it actually did obstruct the view. But I don't remember anybody getting real excited about that and pulling over a whole bunch of people because they had the old dice hanging from the window. Senator Limmer, you and I probably remember those dice that used to hang there and swing in the...
I don't know anything about that.
I was referring to age, but so members, when we throw these kinds of things out and try and I say it and I've said it before, take away tools of those that are out there protecting us, that we want out there to stop those cars, to inquire, and maybe sometimes, and I don't know, I can't tell you, Senator Champion, of how many, lives that I might have saved because I seen a gun in the car. I don't know if any officers can give you that. I don't think they can. But the bottom line is they can stop and inquire, and maybe, just maybe, you wouldn't have a terrible incident like they had that's now going unsolved here in Minneapolis. So think about that before you think about not having officers do what they actually do, and that's inquire. Thanks.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 separate but sort of related questions, if you'll bear with me when I get through both of them, it'll make sense. The first one is on line 209 on the spreadsheet, ignition interlock. This, as I'm understanding this, is coming from the Special Revenue Fund in Driver and Vehicle Services. And my question is, this is, traditionally under the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee, and I would just like some clarity of how we end up with that in the Judiciary bill.
Senator Limmer.
I had a little difficulty hearing that question, but it's something about line 209 on the ignition interlock system, Senator Latz's provision. I'm going to call a friend and have Mr. Backus explain that.
Mr. Backus, too, and I think Senator Kent's question is why it's not in transportation versus why it's here instead of transportation.
All right.
Right.
Mr. Backus or Mr. Turner, who would like to go
Oh,
first?
Madam Chair, I'll say something briefly and then hand it over to Mr. Turner because I think it's a fiscal question. The program of the Ignition Interlock program is related to DWIs, and so is at least 50% judiciary and somewhat transportation as well. But I think the fiscal question can be handled by Mr. Turner.
Mr. Turner.
Madam Chair, members, the policy language is in the transportation bill, and they asked us to carry the numbers.
Oh, you carried the numbers, Senator Limmer.
All right, thank you. And then the
Senator
second one, Madam Chair, is a little further up the page on line 191, and that is the violent crime enforcement teams. And I know that was, and that is with Metro Transit. I know that that was included in the original Senate bill. What's disturbing about that, and that too would be under the transportation jurisdiction most of the time, being part of Metro Transit, but the question I have is, the Senate position was against administrative citations and a transit ambassadors initiative that was in the transportation bill. It seems like it would have been good to have had both, and it seems to me a real shortcoming when you get to the final product that we've got these enforcement teams, task force, but we're not taking a more proactive, community-oriented approach, which was rejected.
Senator
Madam
Limmer.
Chair, Senator Kent, we would have joint jurisdiction with transportation on this. We did hear the request for some of these lesser approaches to managing those that are ticket fare scoffers, let's call it, the ones that don't pay for their tickets. But there's a much more serious problem that has emerged on the light rail lines, and having an ambassador that reminds people to pay their tickets and to help them on and off and give them directions is not adequate to handle the threat to the public. We are seeing more and more assaults on the light rail system. And we had a request from the Ramsey County Sheriff, as well as the Hennepin County Sheriff, with the idea of providing kind of an experimental yet effective VSET where you could actually have individuals in the law enforcement community be in or on or around those rail lines specifically to address the growing crime problem. And with a limited budget, we thought that was the more appropriate use of the dollar than something that would give us less of a result.
Madam Chair,
Senator Kent.
just to wrap up, I hear that, but I do think that, this is much in the model of community policing and just having a presence and having people interacting in a positive way in transit is another approach. And I think it's unfortunate that we're doing one but not the other.
Well,
Senator Limmer.
Madam Chair, Senator Kent, we still have the transit police that are supposed to be in the jurisdiction of protecting the public on those light rail lines as well as the bus lines. However, responding to calls while they drive alongside the track is not adequate enough. And we thought we would try this as a VSET to determine whether or not this might be a more effective and a more immediate response. What I've heard is that transit police will hear of a complaint, they'll get in their cars, or they're in their cars and trucks, and they'll drive quickly to the next stop in order to get to the train before it gets there so they can board the train. By then, the damage has been done, and oftentimes the people that have committed that crime have already escaped. So having just a little extra support might quell the problem and put a signal out that light rail passengers are not the target anymore.
Senator Franson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know we're in the Finance Committee, and I have a finance question, but I also know that we spent a little time on the fentanyl issue, which I think is very important, and I'm also not very happy that it's not included as well. But when it comes to what Senator Champion was referring to and pretextual stops that we talked about a little bit, I spent a couple of years, just under a couple of years, as a law clerk in the Hennepin County Public Defender's Office, and I can recall very vividly the numerous, maybe hundreds of police reports that I read, and sometimes those pretextual stops end up in, like you mentioned, Senator Limmer, in having some evidence, potentially a weapon and so forth. That does not take the legality of the illegally obtained evidence. It's still a question. We still should have some rules in place, and we do. And I remember winning motions to suppress evidence because it was illegally obtained. So there is that side of it, and I know that we want to make sure our communities are safe. And I believe this bill is inadequate to do that. We are providing a lot of resources on one side, but we are letting this community kind of hang out to dry because, for instance, on line 179, the Innovation and Community Safety Grants, we have funding, temporary funding, because it doesn't include tails. And we have a lot of those programs in the spreadsheet that are really good programs, including Youth Intervention Program. I used to chief author that when Senator Dibble passed the baton to me, and really good programs that help with crime, with keeping kids out of trouble, and we can do more. And the innovation grants, this community safety grants, are one of those things that we should be doing more of, not just giving some funding and then withdrawing it after a year or two. So I'm pretty, concerned that we are not investing in community, that we are siding, or not siding, but that we're not really balancing this bill adequately so we can put funding and investments in community safety and public safety. And it's not just officers. My dad was an officer. He left the force back in Puerto Rico because of how hard it was. He saw some of his colleagues hurt. And that's another piece I want to go to on the issue of assaulting officer and penalties with serious bodily harm. I get where that bill is going. I just don't believe that is the right approach to tackling that issue, at least not in the language that I read on starting on section 54.1, where it's very blanket approach. If you hurt someone, you get a penalty, you're going to be in jail up to 30 years. But there are instances, including in our state, that we've dealt with that we can draw really quickly a hypothetical for Senator Ingebrigtsen. In this case, it isn't a hypothetical. It is a hypothetical because it didn't happen. But in the case of the murder of George Floyd, there are bystanders watching an officer using excessive force on a civilian, videotaping it. They didn't intervene because they thought they would also be hurt. Hypothetical, some of those bystanders intervene and push the officer and end up hurting him. This bill would make that basically de facto illegal, and you would be subject to go to prison or jail because you're protecting someone. And I know it's case by case. I know this is just a broad law, but that is the problem I have with the language in the bill. There is serious concern about those incidents, including in New Jersey. I know of a case of a judge who they went to her house and shot her son and her husband. They passed a law to strip those addresses from the books, so to prevent that. Not completely, not 100% proof, but that was done to prevent future tragedies. I think we should really look into this language, and I actually would like to potentially work with you before we get to the floor, because I think the language is overly broad and problematic. Good intent, but potentially overly broad and problematic, and I hope that people that are smarter than me can help us fix it. So I have concerns about that. I have concerns about, again, the lack of investment in our community and bringing not just law enforcement along, but the public. And those innovation community safety grants that were funded here to $10 million, but then there's no money in the tails. So we're going to stop innovation after that money's done. And $10 million is all the innovation we're going to pay for. I think we really should bring in the public in this bill, the communities that we talk about keeping them safe. If we talk about public safety, we're talking about community safety. It takes all of us. And not all of us in rural Minnesota or suburban Minnesota or any other place. Each of our communities are so different. And we should be able to provide that public safety the way we want to be policed, the way we want to be, whatever you want to call it. But this is not either or. It's how do we do it together? And again, I moved to table the bill because, and we're not pushing a motion again because that one already failed, but I can't see myself supporting this without a more balanced approach to public safety. And there are many ideas that never saw the light of day in the Minnesota Senate, in your committee, Senator Limmer. So just because you don't address the issue doesn't mean it goes away. It just gets worse. And our communities are looking at us, are looking at this special end of session, and are scratching their heads, saying, what are they missing? Can't they see how we're hurting? Can't they see that we demand justice, that we demand equality, that we demand real public safety? And I think this bill could do a lot more to address those concerns, Senator Limmer. So can you at least address why there's so much or so little investment in our communities, in particular the Innovation in Community Safety Grant Program? And you can probably, for members who might not know what that is, you can probably share a little bit about what those programs would fund.
Senator Limmer, and before you answer to that, committee members, I'd like to indulge a favor to, if either Senator Marty or Senator Champion or Senator Johnson or Senator you, friends, and if you have any questions to Mr. Turner or Mr. Backus, we have to release them so they can finish their work on this amendment that is supposed to be coming back. So do either of you have any questions for them? Senator Franson, you all good? Senator Moore? Okay. Then I think we will be done with the spreadsheet, and if we do have any questions that come up, we can address it when we come back to that. But we'll finish our discussion here, and then we may have to go into recess after our commissioners too. But Senator Limmer, thank you.
Thank you. One of the lingering issues is a better definition of the innovation of community safety grants, and it is hoped that it will be addressed a bit more in the anticipated amendment. And one thing I might say, Senator Franzen, you raised a couple issues that I think are brand new to the whole discussion about criminal justice in light of this bill. I don't believe some of those issues were even introduced to the Senate at all. So it's hard to answer a question about why it's missing from a bill when it hasn't been introduced in the Senate out of any one of the 67 members. It's true, and I will agree with you that there's lots of issues in the criminal justice system in Minnesota. And there are improvements that can be made. There are repealers that could be introduced. It just goes on, and it's quite a tangle when you start digging into it, because then it has consequential effect as well. Every time we make a change, dominoes fall. And one has to be very careful because it involves constitutional rights as well. And so we try to be as cautious as we can. We try to recognize the parameters established by the Constitution, but at the same time, we know that communities are changing, attitudes are changing, but nevertheless, our top priority is the safety of our citizens. And so we try to make government balance its power with the rights of individual citizens. And I'm glad you brought up some of these issues because it is a constant and continual discussion. It's been around ever since probably 1776. And it's always our challenge. And we can't, and we don't, always solve every problem in every legislative session. But we try to do our best. We have limited budgets from time to time, like we did this year. And so we do our best in applying those budgets to the most appropriate and needful factors that we can. So you're correct in asking why didn't we do certain things, but on the other hand, we're doing the best we can with the available resources that we have.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Madam Chair. Wrong place. Wanted to respond because I think one of my big concerns about the bill is some of the things not in it, some of the policing reforms issues. And I wasn't going to speak on this, but Senator Ingebrigtsen, when you were mentioning some of the tragedies where some young kids were killed, and if a police officer had hypothetically seen a car that later was involved in one of these shootings run a stop sign or have equipment out, and if they stopped them, they might have seen the gun and picked it out. Using that logic, you could stop every car. And you'd find guns in some of the cars, you'd find risk, and you might prevent some of those crimes. But there's a problem with doing that in our society, with the idea you're going to stop every car for no purpose. And so when we start using these pretextual stops, you got to find out, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it in a fair way? I've been stopped maybe 2-3 times in my life, and probably for doing something wrong. But Mr. Castillo, who was killed about 5 years ago in a police officer shooting that came from a, I would argue, pretextual stop, he had been stopped like 30 times in the 2 years before that. And from what we know of him, it was not like he was violating the law all the time. It was just simply because he happened to be African-American, driving in community where they seem to be targeting them. And so I guess I have a real concern that we're not doing anything about pretextual stops and so on, but I really want to push back against your hypothetical that what if one of those crimes, horrific crimes, none of us are going to disagree about that, and how I'd say we could do more about the proliferation of guns and other things to address those as well. But the idea that pretextual stops, the cops just might have pulled over this car if they had done something or noticed something, and by chance that car was going to be the one involved in a shooting, I just think that that's just totally irresponsible way of looking at how we're going to prevent crime. And given our real history of discrimination in terms of those stops, I think that's why it bothers me so much that it's not in the bill. And it's not a question, but I welcome a comment and response.
Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and or is it President? I forget.
You got the right gender at least.
Thank you for those comments, Senator Marty. And number one, they don't stop all cars. Right now, the way the trend is going is we're going to be looking at some empty squad cars if we don't really, pay attention here. So that hypothetical that you give me or that you throw out there or whatever you call, but looking at what the State Patrol is just, that's just the State Patrol. And these probably are some people that are traveling through our state, and the amount of guns that they recovered in a couple of years. Can you tell me how many of those, by taking away those illegal guns, how many crimes you could have stopped? I don't think you can do that. But if they're there and they not supposed to have them, thank goodness they stopped them for going 7 or 8 or 10 miles over the limit. Because they may have stopped another shooting as what went on in Minneapolis. We just don't know that. We just don't know that. But if you're going to take away that particular tool from law enforcement, it's not about law enforcement, Senator Marty. It really is not about law enforcement. It is about what we've totally lost in the discussion here. It's about the public's safety, not law enforcement. The comments about George Floyd keep coming up. I want to ask this. Do you think justice was given in the George Floyd case, or don't you? You have bad cops out there, and they're dealt with, and there's statutes in place to deal with that, as well as there is bad, whatever, plumbers. But, I mean, I can give you hypothetical after hypothetical. The point is, we're not talking about the 10 stops that I make in a night, and 9 of them actually are let go or reminded to get their taillight fixed. You never hear about those stops. And that's actually good community policing. And not every cop is going to write a ticket for everything that they pull them over for. I can tell you that after practicing law enforcement for 34 years, it doesn't happen. They wouldn't have time to do that. Sometimes it's just a nice gesture. Being pulled over, yeah, it doesn't seem like a nice gesture, but it is, and it can be very positive, and it is positive. We have some of the best trained officers in the country in the state of Minnesota. And again, yes, you have bad apples, but you do in every profession, and you deal with it. And it has been dealt with. But, you know, I hate to use those beautiful kids as a what if. But you can't defend that. You can't defend that. If he was in haste and going to go over there and he was going to take care of business in that yard, he might have made a mistake. But oh no, the legislature said, well, I don't have to, you know, we're not going to pull him over for that. I don't have to worry about it because he can't pull me over for running that stop sign or changing lanes real fast or erratic. Let's not go there, folks. Let's just not go there. And thank you, Senator Limmer, for not going there.
Senator Marty.
Chair, first of all, I don't think justice is done in George Floyd's case. He's still dead. Nothing can change that. You can't fix that. The officer, Chauvin, former officer Chauvin, it has been held accountable. That doesn't provide justice. But I think you're totally missing the point. Yes, I can spend as much time as you want to talking about those 3 innocent kids who were killed, or one still living, hanging on. Can talk about that. And yes, that's a horrific thing. But the idea that you're going to kind of, oh, we're not, the pretextual stops isn't stopping somebody from arresting somebody for running a stop sign, for breaking the law that way. It's saying you're not going to do it for things that aren't really affecting the public safety in that way. Something hanging from a rearview mirror. The whole point of it is that you or I might be just as likely to have the tail light out or the pretextual stop kind of cause, and we don't get stopped. And that's partly, I think it's a reality, that's partly because of our race. And the idea that I didn't throw out a hypothetical. I'm saying that using the logic of your hypothetical, cops ought to stop every car, and they will get guns out of some of the cars, and they will stop some killings. It's not a very efficient way to do it, but I'm not sure the pretextual stops is either, and it's clearly leading to a lot of officer-caused deaths. And again, I'll get back to the fact that Philando Castile, 30 stops, or 30-some stops, and he's a 30-year-old guy or so. I've had 2 or 3 in my life. And I'm sure it's not because I'm a perfect driver. It's just simply because of the race. Because some officers stop people, more likely to stop people because of their race and other things. And that's the reason that those provisions matter. And this isn't saying we want to let people off the hook, but just because a pretextual stop, not for running a stop sign or something, but for dice or something hanging from the rearview mirror or things like that, expired tabs, that's not going to lead to any more safety. And that's the whole point of it. I think what I'm saying is your pretextual stop, your hypothetical situation isn't real. It's not realistic about the way things work. And that's what I have objection to. Again, that's something that's not in the bill, but it's one of the things, the reason I have trouble with the bill, not because of some of the things in the bill, but because some of the things not in the bill. And I think we're at a time in our society, the whole world's been looking at us. I once worked near 38th in Chicago. Everybody in the world has seen that neighborhood. And it's a worldwide phenomenon because of Minneapolis and because of some of our policing strategies that we've done. The whole world's been watching what we're doing for the last year and a half, and I think and they'd like to see us do some more to reform our policing. And I think there were some reasonable provisions in the House bill that didn't get hearings here and didn't get a chance to be heard and should be in this bill. I'm disappointed in that. And I'm just saying this because your hypothetical was pointed out why we need some of those provisions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I don't want to belabor this. I think this is, obviously, we're not taking care of any of the financial aspects here. We're talking more about policy. However, some of the comments that were made are criticizing the bill because of not enough money being spent on community projects and community-based policing, which I happen to agree there should be some more money for that. But I also believe that it should be a statewide grant, not just Minneapolis. And I get to that point too and the reason I get to that point is that I think a balanced approach is what Senator Limmer has in this bill with regards to all of Minnesota, not just Minneapolis. The world is looking at Minneapolis. That's what happened here, folks. They looked at Minneapolis. They didn't look at Minnesota. And what we do here, if we allow this to happen, is going to affect all of rural Minnesota, all of Minnesota. So maybe Minneapolis needs to take a bigger and better look at what's going on. So we don't have to have these heated discussions about how terrible law enforcement is. Because we don't seem to have these issues out in rural Minnesota. And I'm not saying we're better than that. I'm not saying that, okay, you don't have the diversity in rural Minnesota. Fact of the matter is, I'm really tired of hearing that because you're black, you're getting pulled over. That's not even part of my thought process. And I think we should quit that because it's dividing us horribly. And I'm going to stop with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ingebrigtsen. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we still waiting for the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so we can continue down this line for a little while then.
Yes.
Okay. No, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. First of all, in my district, a lot of the issues that we're talking about, Senator Franzen and Senator Marty brought up this afternoon, aren't discussed as much. The pretextual stops, those sorts of things are not a thing that my constituents are overly concerned about, has not been an issue so much in my district. But I think what gets kind of lost in this as well is also the differentiation between the different departments. You know, we've got State Patrol, we've got BCA, we've got our city cops, we have sheriff's departments, we have all these different groups that are working on our behalf. And, you know, in Minneapolis, where most of the issues that we hear about in this committee and what's coming from the House, where most of those issues are coming from, I think Senator Franzen brought up those traffic stops, and Senator Marty talked about them. Those are down 80 to 90% over the last year. So are we gonna go across the state right now and mandate, you know, pretextual stops after these stops based on vehicle safety have to stop because of what's going on in Minneapolis? I don't know. I think Minneapolis is adjusting the problem that they're having based on their, whether it's their city officers or if their sheriff's department or whatever, they're really addressing that. The other thing that the city is doing is taking a proactive approach, and they put in $2.5 million for some community policing aspect. Those are community things that the community government, whether it's city or county government, is putting resources to, which they should be doing, addressing those local problems. And I agree that that's a place where they can be making an impact. Also, the governor's promised, I think, $15 million for alternatives to policing. There, he's taken a step being so he's the executive branch, he has control over state patrol, and he can be addressing those, oh, I'm supposed to start my video, sorry. Addressing those issues as well. So we are not the only body that can be addressing these issues. In fact, I don't think we are the best body to be addressing these issues. You should be able to address these within your community where you see those problems occurring. And I applaud the city of Minneapolis for taking an approach, putting $2.5 million and trying to put some money towards that issue. I applaud the governor for putting $15 million into that issue. I think that's where it needs to be done. That's where the problems are that we see, that we hear about. So I think we're on the right path in several respects. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Senator Champion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a couple things I want to say. First, I want to speak to something that Senator Engelbrechtson said. One is, there's this thing that's called the Constitution. And there happens to be the Fourth Amendment that talks about unreasonable searches and seizures. What I believe Senator Engelbrechtson seems to keep suggesting is that if you throw out as much provocative language to talk about the city of Minneapolis and talk about crime, that seems to suggest that we should forfeit our Constitution. That seems to be interesting language coming from my friends across the aisle. We should always make sure that every person is treated as an American. Here's the second thing I want to say. Senator Engelbrechtson, you may say people are not stopped because they're black. You're not black. And it's borderline offensive because from my vantage point, I have been stopped in your neighborhood, be it Cloquet, whether I'm in Scott County, whether I'm in Edina, no matter where I am, all across the state, no matter what I'm going for. It doesn't matter if I have a shirt and tie on or not. There is a different vantage point, and a part of the problem with this bill and your perspective is that you don't take the time to look at things from another person's perspective. You only want this perspective if we're dealing with greater Minnesota when it comes to ag issues. I hear people saying all the time, oh, we got to deal with our farmers. We got to deal with this issue, that issue. And because you're from the cities, you don't understand those issues. That could be true. But you know what I work very hard to do? Is to understand. Not to pretend like I know, but to understand that there's a different vantage point that a person has based on race, ethnicity, geography. It's a number of different things. But I think it's unfortunate when I hear legislators talking about whether something is being done because someone is black or not. You're not black. You should at least ask a black person. Like I should ask a farmer about some of these critical issues that I don't know anything about in order to gain insight and understanding. But that's not what I'm hearing. So to Senator Johnson, stop saying Minneapolis, sir. This is an issue that the city, that we as a state are dealing with. And I'm a person of color, and I'm telling you that it's a statewide issue. Simply because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not happening. Simply because I'm not molesting a child doesn't mean a child is not being molested. Simply because I'm not abusing my wife, it doesn't mean that women are not being abused. And we should never diminish another person's experience without asking a critical question. And that's the problem with the bill. It only comes from a majority person's perspective. It does not consider the sensitivity or even the dialogue that needs to be put forward. And Senator Limmer indicated earlier how Senator Franzen has brought some issues up that no one put a bill in, and that's untrue. But it sounds good to say because people think if you say it enough, then that's going to make it true. You can say it 1,000 times, it is still untrue. There are still bills that we ask to be heard in judiciary that would address some of these issues.
and could be done in an open and transparent way in order to really get to the nitty gritty, because I'm not for bashing the police. No one's ever heard me say defund the police. But I don't want pretextual stops that only happen to people of color, and just because it's not happening to you to suggest that it's not happening, it's happening. And there is a different experience. And so, Senator Limmer, Senator Johnson, Senator Engelbretson, I would hope that you would take a step back and let's stop this, because it's unfortunate. Senator Limmer, if you're going to be the chair, which you are, and you know I respect you, hear the bills. Let us wrestle with these critical issues. Just ignoring it is not addressing it. Time is neutral. It is what you do within the time that makes the difference. And yes, we can all say, yeah, the world is changing. I'm not sure how much it's changing. We can even joke about whether Senator Engelbretson or you, Senator Limmer, had dice in your on your rearview mirror and whether you got stopped or not. And you know what? I could laugh too and say, of course you didn't get stopped. And Senator Marty was being nice and kind when he says, because you are not people of color. I have to tell my sons when they leave this house because they drive, how to make sure everything's right, no matter where they go. They're not just in the city of Minneapolis. So we need to stop acting as if it's just the city of Minneapolis. We are a state, and we should be really engaged around how do we help each other? How do we make sure that my children are not having a certain experience, your children are not having a certain experience, that we can really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, wow, we are making the changes that we need to. But we are not doing that when we can hear Senator Engelbretson make a statement about whether someone is being stopped because they're black or not. And Senator, you're not black. And you haven't asked me, I would tell you, I've been stopped 30, 40 times a year. And you can say, well, maybe it's because you're a bad driver. Could be. But not when someone comes to the car and the first thing they ask me is, why are you in this community? Where are you going? So let's be careful about the things we say, especially if we say we care about human beings. And I care about human beings, regardless of their race and ethnicity. And if they're telling me that there's a problem, then I should listen and try to find a way to address it, but not ignore it and say that's addressing it. That's not addressing it. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I hope that we understand that this bill should be much more comprehensive and should not just be so law enforcement focused, because law enforcement is one side of the equation, but we also have experiences too. Oh, and the last thing that I'll say, let's stop using this provocative language about these unfortunate 3 children that got shot and killed. That must be addressed, and I'm addressing that in my community. I am on the forefront of that issue because I'm pushing over and over again because I don't like crime, period. But I do not like you using provocative language to excuse your behavior. And that's
Senator
what I hear a lot
Champion,
of.
Senator Champion,
Yes.
we may
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
just back that off just a little bit, please.
Okay.
I don't
well,
think that was
I'm-
provocative language that he was using, so please.
I think it's provocative, Madam Chair.
I know,
because you
but
talk about
let's
kids in
be
my community.
respectful in this committee, Senator Champion, please.
I'm always respectful. I'm just saying, Madam Chair, I have feelings too, my community has feelings too. Whether you all think it's provocative or not, it does come across that way. And it comes across terribly. So with all due respect, I just wish we had a more comprehensive bill that did not just use provocative language by which to justify things. We have a constitution, and we should have a sense of humanity in order to do the right thing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Champion. I do want to say that one of the officers that drove one of the young children, one of the girls, to the hospital, who subsequently has died, their father, their parents, his parents are from my district. So it has affected everybody in this, in some way or another around this table and in this building. Senator Kiffmeyer, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This kind of discussion reminds me somewhat of a period of time some years ago when local newspaper asked me to cover the Big Lake Township Board meetings. And I thought, well, you know, I've been a bit critical and questioning and all that. I had to walk in their shoes for a while and go put an effort on this. And I think that's what Senator Champion is talking about here, that we walk in each other's shoes and see life from their perspective. That's always good. But it's not one-sided. You know, how many have taken the time to speak to law enforcement and what it's like for them or their wives or spouses who are not sure if they're going to come home safe tonight? And I think we recognize the come home safe is for everybody, but so often I hear this perspective as being kind of looking at it more in a one-sided basis. And I, especially now, I just think how many law enforcement people have been asked by others to say, what's it like for you? I do know that I've made that effort to speak to those who are people of color, whatever they may be, to sit and chat and say, just tell me about it, tell me what it's like, tell me what you experience. And I've done this for a number of years because I think it is really important. It's why I wrote for the township board meetings, and oh my appreciation of the work it takes to get the names spelt right, the association spelt right, to follow up and get the facts, and everybody's going to read about them. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to be able to have that. And so I think that walking in their shoes, but the implication here is that we don't do that. That because we're supporting of this really good bill of Senator Limmer's, that somehow we have not done that. And I don't believe that's the case whatsoever. I think every single one of us have tried to walk in that and talk with people. Maybe they're not the ones you know, Senator Champion. Maybe they're ones that you don't have contact with. But we certainly do have many around us and make those efforts to see them from that perspective. But putting this bill together today, criticizing because what it doesn't have, I take a look at all of the funds and all of the resources that are going greatly into communities that need some of this extra effort are pretty substantial. And so maybe it's looking at it in different ways, or what we always want is to have more, but I look at what is, and am very pleased with the work that Senator Limmer and his team have put together, and I have every confidence that he also took a look at walking in others' shoes or seeing life from their perspective, that was not something that he left out of the part of his process. So thank you, Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to bring a slightly different perspective and in many ways sort of try to add on to what Senator Champion was talking about. You know, it is important to remember Dante Wright was not killed in Minneapolis. Philando Castile, a legal gun owner, was not killed in Minneapolis. Even in my own community, and I think people sometimes have perceptions about the city of Woodbury, it is a very diverse community. And we are having the exact same conversations about policing and about the experience of people of color and how they are treated driving around the streets of Woodbury. And I'm really grateful because I feel like the leaders in our community are stepping up to these conversations and listening. That represents a real change in the history of our community. But this is what we need to be doing, and it goes back to that point of perspective and being able to have voices brought to the table to let the rest of us understand what that perspective is like. Senator Champion talked about the process and the fact that a lot of these things didn't get hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee, which made it hard really just for us to, again, it's about hearing the voices, about listening to people's experiences. We didn't have that opportunity in the Senate. And then the bills that we have seen come out of the Judiciary Committee have reflected that lack of perspective. I would point to something that is in this bill, in spite of the exact same problem, the changes that we see in the criminal sexual conduct. There weren't hearings on those issues, It took, frankly, women standing up on the floor of the Minnesota Senate, offering amendments, making the case, and they got added in, and then they made it through the process. That is what we're looking at here and saying we are falling short when it comes to the issues of policing. We have not given that same opportunity to have these positions really heard and considered and factored in. We need to be doing better. And that is why so many of us are really frustrated with the process that got us to the place where this bill falls short of what Minnesotans around the state, not just in Minneapolis, are asking for and what they deserve.
Thank you, Senator Kent. We do have 2 commissioners online, but Senator Limmer, do you have any comments to wrap this up?
Madam Chair, the committee here is kind of going through the role of what we in the judiciary do almost every meeting. And the issues are rather complex. You're just skimming the surface, unlike our practice. But nevertheless, I'm glad you're having the discussion. It gives you a little indication of how complex some of these issues are. I did want to remind the committee that this is the first year in a biennium, which is traditionally our budget year. And we take that role rather seriously in the Judiciary Committee, and when Senator Latz had it previously, he did too. We write a budget bill. The other chamber has a completely different perspective on how they handle the issues in front of their committee. And in this case, they put together nearly a 400-page bill with 320 pages of it dealing with policy, compared to our 89 pages of budget and related issues that were triggered by a budget responsibility. That's why we have the focus as we do on some of these issues and why we do not address other issues in the first year of a biennium. The second year is reserved for a more in-depth discussion on issues, and it's been rather a tradition in the Minnesota Senate Judiciary Committee to do exactly that. And so it makes us realize that our role in governing, our role in making new law is not to cram as much into one possible year and then duplicate it every year like the other chamber has a tendency to do. We try to be thoughtful. We have a lot more discussion than they do. And so it takes a little more time in the Senate. We are more deliberative, and we've developed that practice. But we make better law. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And so there is a little catch-up when it comes to conference committees, but nevertheless, we do our best to incorporate some of the best ideas into this bill. So nevertheless, you're having a wonderful discussion on the role of what we do with criminal justice and what we do with policing and what do we do with our available budget that we have. So I encourage the discussion, and I'll let you move on to other testifiers, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Limmer. We do have 3 commissioners here. Commissioner Schnell from the Department of Corrections. Thank you for being patient, and welcome to the Senate Finance Committee.
No, thank you so much, Madam Chair and members. I appreciate having the opportunity to listen in on a conversation. And I want to first start by thanking acknowledging and thanking the conferees who have been at work on this bill. I want to talk about a couple of things that really, I think, were highlighted so that keep my comments short. First, I'm grateful that the base adjustment was made to maintain DOC core operations. The department came in this year with a budget proposal that was quite balanced out of the chute. We were quite similar relative to our previous year's budget, and with cuts that were proposed, there was not a significant increase, which is quite unusual. And an agency our size, just simply base adjustment alone oftentimes eats up a large chunk of the committee target. I also want to really highlight and point out the fact and how appreciative we are about the passage and the support on a bipartisan basis for the Hardell-Sherrill Act, which is the expanded jail oversight bill, in which, you know, the state has both a moral, legal, and constitutional obligation to ensure services and safety for those people who are incarcerated. And this bill, which addressed issues that in many cases have not been addressed for as many as 50 to 100 years in our state, was done and developed in collaboration with Minnesota Sheriff's Association, NAMI, and a number of impacted families who I think, for members who heard it, gave some, I think, immensely and profound testimony to the committee that spoke to the need for us to address some of these issues. There was a couple of matters of both policy and a budget, and I know that this is the Finance Committee, and I want to point out the fact that we are grateful for the budget support on the Healthy Start Act, which, as you know, covers and provides services for women who are pregnant or immediately postpartum who have been committed to the custody of the Department of Corrections, and Senator Osmick's reentry and homelessness mitigation bill, which this bill will ultimately provide funding for. I also want to lift up the fact that the sexual assault working group we felt really strongly about and are grateful to see that included in the bill along with the civil asset forfeiture, that which, as the Chair Limmer pointed out, has been something that has been the focus of much discussion for many years, even going back to my days in law enforcement. And finally, I just want to really speak to the fact that as a part of the criminal justice system, it's critical that we in the Department of Corrections recognize, I think, the interconnectedness in terms of the range of functions that are supported by the work of this committee. Our courts, public safety functions, public defense, and importantly, human rights. I would also say that as a criminal justice system and as a state, it is our hope, and I think many of the things that we were able to do, and there were things that I wish we would have been able to do, really would be a focus on what works, what actually addresses some of the problems that we have. How do we actually look at in reducing recidivism, improving public safety outcomes, and trying to save state resources? How do we improve decision-making around things like life sentence parole decisions, and doing that in a shared governance kind of manner, which was proposed and unable to get through in this year. But these are things that we think are focused on what works, and we hope and we look forward to coming back next year to have more comprehensive discussions about these measures, with the hope that at the end of the day we can live out our mission of transforming lives to create a safer Minnesota, and that is for everyone, and that we recognize that what happens in policing affects what happens in corrections. What happens in corrections is essential and important to criminal justice. And with that, Madam Chair, I would stand for any questions that you or the committee may have. But I thank you for the opportunity to address.
Thank you, Commissioner. You bet. Are there any questions, Commissioner? Thank you so much for being here today, Commissioner, for your work on all of this. And Deputy Commissioner O'Hearn, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to provide a few comments. I want to thank Chair Limmer for his work on getting a bipartisan agreement, and of course to all the staff who have worked hard at bringing this bill forward. The bill makes important investments to the Department of Public Safety, and we're grateful for the significant efforts that so many have put in. The bill provides funding for community grants, including combating sex traffic, public safety innovation, and survivor supports. It also includes necessary operating adjustments for the Department of Public Safety and the investment in scientists and equipment at the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. These investments will improve the timeliness of justice by expanding our pilot rapid DNA program and improving the turnaround time for drug driving toxicology tests. While it only partially funds the cybersecurity necessary to protect the Minnesota Justice Information Systems from cyber attacks, we look forward to continuing to work with the legislature in the future, in future budgets, to finish the funding that's necessary and needed to secure these systems. The disaster contingency account is extremely low, and the investment in this bill will make sure that local communities can continue to recover when disaster strikes. The department delivered on the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women Task Force report, and we are really pleased that the legislature is acting on the cornerstone recommendation of establishing the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Relatives Office. The expansion of the Juvenile Justice Unit will make sure that the state is meeting the obligations of the Federal Juvenile Justice Act and continue to work on improving the disparities in Minnesota's juvenile justice system. As you are aware, the Minnesota fire system runs largely on a volunteer basis or paid on call, and the Hometown Heroes Act is an important investment to caring for our firefighters. Public safety is a constitutionally required government service, and we appreciate funding for the critical investments that are contained in this bill. We look forward to continuing to work with this committee, with the Public Safety Committee in the future years on other policy matters, and I'll stand for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Do we have any questions for Deputy Commissioner O'Hearn? Okay, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work on this. And Commissioner Lucero.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Rose and committee members.
Good afternoon.
I get to see you. Now, for the record, my name is Rebecca Lucero, and I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to testify today, and also to all the conferees for the work. With respect to the Public Safety and Judiciary bill, I'm going to start by extending my appreciation for including the full operating adjustment for MDHR. You've heard me talk about it, how important that is, and we appreciate it. You also included some additional capacity to the agency, which we appreciate. Investigating cases of discrimination, now that's a core department function, and this added capacity will have an immediate benefit to our department. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we wish the governor's full request was met to best meet our core functions. However, of course, compromise is part of every final deal. I also appreciate the inclusion of the adjustment of our workforce and equal pay certificate fees. That moves it from $150 to $250 for a 4-year certificate. The department certificate fees have actually not been adjusted since their inception, which was 2003 for workforce certificates and 2014 for equal pay certificates. For context, these certificates are held by large state contractors who often have multi-million-dollar contracts, and the certificates help ensure that existing state and federal equal pay laws are followed and that women and Minnesotans of color have fair hiring opportunities on these state-funded contracts. Additionally, we were happy to see the inclusion of a few policy items. There's the technical bill, which was primarily a bill composed of OLA recommendations. There's a policy to provide reasonable enforcement tools for violations of workforce and equal pay certificates, as well as important policies for the interactive process for people with disabilities seeking a reasonable accommodation. When legislators originally drafted the Human Rights Act 54 years ago, they included the statement, discrimination threatens the rights and privileges of the inhabitants of the state and menaces the institutions and foundations of democracy. And 54 years later, this statement remains very true. Discrimination has no place in Minnesota. We have to be really intentional about this work. And these modest investments and policy changes into MDHR allow the agency to better live out what's intentionally written into statute. Echoing Commissioner Schnell, there are many pieces within the judiciary budget that are deeply interconnected and support a stronger Minnesota. Increases to legal aid, public defenders, judges, support for interpreters, and of course, support for MDHR are all part of a stronger justice system. A strong judicial system is an incredibly important foundation for democracy, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and work that has gone into the judiciary budget and policy pieces throughout. Thank you for the time to provide brief remarks, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lucero. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much for your time today and your work, too. It is very good pieces in the bill for your department. Absolutely. With that, members, I think we're going to need to go into a recess. There's work still continuing on, at least on one amendment. So I think just stay tuned, and it'll be the call of the chair. Any questions? All right, with that, we are in recess.